She's basically Ryan's charity case. My sister-in-law said it loud enough for the whole table to hear, and the room did exactly what she wanted. Laughter rippled across 12 people who had known me for 4 years and still treated me like a guest who hadn't left. I didn't flinch. I picked up my wine glass and took a slow sip. My name is Nadia Ellison. I'm 31. I married into this family 3 years ago at a small ceremony my mother-in-law described afterward as intimate, which was her word for disappointing. My husband Ryan is the second of 3 children. His older sister Dana is the one who said it. His mother Diane is the one who smiled. It was the annual holiday dinner at their house in Westchester. The kind of house designed to make you aware of your place the moment you walk through the door. 12-foot ceilings. A dining table that seats 16. Christmas arrangements that cost more than my first car. Every year, Ryan's parents invited not just family, but a rotating cast of business contacts and social acquaintances, people who existed somewhere between colleague and status prop. This year, Dana had brought 2 of her own clients, men in their 50s who wore the particular kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. Ryan wasn't there. His firm had sent him to Singapore 3 days before the dinner, and he'd called me twice that morning apologizing in the distracted way of someone who was already mentally elsewhere. I told him it was fine. I told him I could handle his family alone. He believed me, which should have told him something about how little he actually understood either of us. I noticed the man in the dark blazer the moment I sat down. He was seated near the far end of the table, introduced to me only as a colleague of Dana's named Warren. He had the kind of stillness that didn't match the room. Everyone else was performing. Warren was simply watching. Glass raised, but rarely sipped from. Eyes moving with the quiet efficiency of someone cataloging information. He looked at me once when I sat down, just a fraction of a second longer than casual. I didn't think much of it then. Dana had been in real estate development for 6 years. She talked about it the way some people talk about religion, total faith, no room for skepticism. Slightly offended if you didn't share her enthusiasm. She'd built a decent portfolio, mid-size residential projects mostly in Connecticut and New Jersey, and she wore that success like a second skin. Around her family, she wore it like a weapon. Around me, she'd always aimed. The first year I joined these dinners, she asked what I did 3 times in one evening, each time with a fresh expression of mild surprise when I answered. The second year, she started describing my job to other guests before I could, getting it slightly wrong in ways that made it sound smaller. The third year, she stopped asking and started making declarations. Nadia works in finance, she would say. The word finance carrying just enough pause to suggest it might as well be data entry. Tonight, she hadn't waited for an opportunity. She'd made one. It started when Diane mentioned, warmly and with obvious pride, that Dana had just closed the largest development deal of her career. A mixed-use, complex outside Providence. $42 million. Everyone congratulated her, and Dana accepted it the way she accepted most things, like it was the minimum she'd been owed. Then someone asked if Ryan was coming, and Diane explained about Singapore, and one of Dana's clients said something polite about demanding careers, and Dana looked at me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Ryan's always working, she said. He married someone low maintenance. Didn't want the pressure of a wife with real ambitions. She laughed. Honestly, smart move. She's basically his charity case. The table laughed, not everyone. But enough. Warren stopped swirling his glass. Diane touched the rim of her wine with one finger, the smallest possible gesture of composure, and said, Dana, be kind. But she didn't tell her to stop. She never told her to stop. In 4 years, I had learned that Diane's corrections were decorative. They existed so that she could tell herself, later, that she had said something. I looked at Dana and gave her nothing. Not anger, not tears, not the tight smile I used to offer as a peace gesture. I looked at her the way you look at a stranger who has just said something you'll forget by morning, and I turned back to my plate. Under the table, my phone vibrated. I didn't check it. Dana was already moving on, telling the table about the Providence project, the vision, the timeline, the investors who'd believed in her from the beginning. She had a gift for making a room feel like it existed to receive her. Her clients leaned forward. Her mother nodded with the soft, proud rhythm of someone hearing a favorite song. I ate my food and listened and watched Warren. He was watching me. Not the way men sometimes watch women at parties, measuring or appraising. He was watching me the way you watch someone you're trying to place, like a name on the tip of your tongue that won't come. I looked at him once, directly. He didn't look away. There is something particular about being dismissed for a long time. It doesn't feel like one wound. It feels like weather, something you live inside so long you forget there was ever a different climate. I had lived inside this family's version of me for 3 years. The wife who didn't quite fit. The woman Ryan had chosen despite the general consensus that he could have done better. The quiet one at the end of the table who worked in finance. Sort of, in a vague way, nobody needed to understand. The version they had of me was so complete, so settled, that correcting it had started to feel like arguing about the color of a wall that had already been painted and dried and hung with pictures. So I hadn't corrected it. I had signed confidentiality agreements that required my silence. I had chosen work that rewarded discretion. I had married a man who loved me and respected my privacy, even when he didn't fully understand its dimensions. And I had come to these dinners for 3 years and eaten the food, and absorbed the small dismissals and said nothing. My phone buzzed again. Warren set his fork down very carefully. Dana was describing the financing structure of the Providence deal, the layers of capital, the patience it required to bring together the right partners. She said it had taken 18 months to close. She said the lead investor had been difficult to reach, methodical, not given to quick decisions, but ultimately the right fit for the project's scale. Warren looked at me again. This time, his expression had changed. The cataloging was done. The name had come. He knew. I could see it in the way he sat slightly straighter, the way he looked at Dana talking, and then looked back at me sitting quietly and seemed to be doing a rapid, private calculation. I reached under the table and checked my phone. 2 emails from my assistant. One from our managing partner, and a message from our compliance team flagged urgent. I read the subject line and put the phone face down on my thigh without reacting. I had been patient for 3 years. I could be patient for a few more minutes. Dana finished her story to applause and picked up her glass and looked at me with the satisfied expression of someone who has just demonstrated, again, the distance between us. Sorry, Nadia, I know this stuff probably goes over your head. Finance is finance, but development is different. It's real. You can actually see it when it's done. I understand development, I said. Quietly. Without heat. She smiled. Of course you do. Warren put his napkin on the table. Dana, he said, and something in the way he said it made everyone pause. He had barely spoken all evening. His voice had weight by virtue of its absence. I want to make sure I'm understanding something correctly. Dana turned to him with the warm, proprietary smile she used on clients. Of course, Warren. What's on your mind? He nodded once, slowly, and looked down the table at me. This is Nadia Ellison. Dana blinked. Yes. My sister-in-law. Nadia Ellison, he said again, not a question this time. Managing partner. NVP Capital. The table went very quiet. Not the polite quiet of a pause between courses. The different kind. The kind with weight. Diane's hand stopped moving. Dana's smile didn't disappear immediately. It did something worse. It held, frozen. While her eyes did the calculation her expression hadn't caught up to yet. Warren continued, the same measured cadence, like he was reading from a document he'd memorized. NVP Capital is the lead investor on your Providence project. They hold the primary stake in your last 3 developments. They approved your expansion into New Jersey in 2022. He paused. They've been approving things for you for a while now. A fork hit a plate somewhere down the table. Diane said my name once. Very softly, the way you say a word you've mispronounced for years when someone finally corrects you. Dana opened her mouth. Nothing came out. I stood up slowly. I didn't rush. I had spent enough time sitting in this house. I took my time. I want to tell you that I felt triumphant in that moment. I want to say the righteous satisfaction was clean and complete. But the truth is the first thing I felt was tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying something heavy for so long that you've reorganized your entire body around the weight, and when you finally set it down you don't feel lighter. You just feel the ache of all the years it was there. I looked at Diane first. She couldn't hold my eyes. That hurt more than anything Dana had said all evening. I looked at Dana. Her frozen smile had finally melted. What replaced it was something rawer, less composed. Not quite shame. More like the look of someone who has just discovered they've been walking across a floor they thought was solid and has just heard it begin to crack. I didn't want to embarrass her. That is something people don't always believe when I tell them, but it's true. I had never wanted this to be a performance. I just needed it to be real. I'm not a charity case, I said. I kept my voice low, even. The way you keep a door from slamming. I've never been one. And I'm not going to keep sitting at this table, pretending that I don't mind. Dana said my name. Not warmly, not an apology. More like a rope she was grabbing. I'm not angry. I told her, and I meant it. I'm done. Warren was already on his feet. His manner had shifted completely, the client warmth replaced by something more careful and professional. He came around the table toward me and said, quietly enough that only I could clearly hear, I had no idea. I want to apologize for not making the connection sooner. I shook my head slightly. You don't owe me anything. He lowered his voice further. There's a call I need to make. Tonight, if possible. About the Providence timeline. I looked at him for a moment. Monday morning, I said. My assistant will find the time. He nodded, and there was a respect in it that I hadn't been looking for and was surprised to feel move through me like something warm. I picked up my coat from the chair. Diane said my name again, louder this time, with the particular desperate energy of someone watching a conversation move somewhere they cannot follow. Nadia, sweetheart, please don't leave. This is a misunderstanding. I looked at her. Really looked, the way I'd been careful not to for 3 years because I'd known what I would see. A woman who was not unkind exactly, but who had always loved the version of me that was smaller. Who had smiled at Dana's jokes not because she was cruel, but because it had never occurred to her that cruelty required her intervention to stop. It's not a misunderstanding, I said gently. You've understood me exactly the way you chose to. She flinched. It was small, but I saw it. I put on my coat. Dana had found her voice. She followed me away from the table, her heels quick on the hardwood, her hand landing on my arm. Nadia, wait. Just wait a second. Her voice had lost its dinner party polish. She sounded younger, less certain. I didn't know. How was I supposed to know? I stopped. I didn't pull my arm away. I turned and looked at her. You weren't supposed to know, I said. That's not the issue. She shook her head. Then what is? You didn't think you needed to know, I said. Because you'd already decided who I was. She opened her mouth. Closed it. The silence between us held everything she couldn't figure out how to say. I've been in those meetings, I told her. Not as Ryan's wife, as the person approving your budgets. I've read every proposal you've submitted in the last 3 years. I have signed off on your timelines, your cost overruns, your requests for extensions. Every single one. I paused. I believed in your work, Dana. Even when you were telling a dinner table I was a charity case. Her eyes went bright in a way that wasn't flattering or staged. She was genuinely undone. The Providence deal is good, I said. You built something real. That's true regardless of tonight. I buttoned my coat. But so am I. And I'm done being invisible in this house. I walked out through the front door. The cold hit me the moment I stepped outside, sharp and immediate, and I stood on the front steps for a moment just breathing. The night was clear. Stars over the dark outline of the trees at the edge of the property. Somewhere inside, I could hear the low, uncertain sound of the dinner resuming, chairs shifting, voices finding a new, careful register. I called a car and stood with my hands in my pockets and waited. My phone rang. Ryan. I answered. How's the dinner going? He asked. Everything okay? I thought about that word, okay. Such a small container for such a large thing. It's fine, I said. I left early. A pause. Did something happen? I'll tell you when you're home, I said. It's not bad, it's just time. He was quiet for a moment with the quality of someone who understood that more had happened than he was being told. Are you okay? Yes, I said. And I meant it completely for the first time in 3 years. I'm better than okay. Monday morning came gray and clean. the way winter mornings in the city do when the weekend noise has settled. I was in the office by 7:30. My assistant had already set coffee on my desk and blocked the first hour for a call I hadn't asked her to schedule. She handed me a note when I walked in. Warren had called Sunday evening. He wanted to move quickly. He had been thinking about the Providence project and about other projects and about a longer-term conversation he'd been meaning to have with NVP about future pipeline. I sat down, looked out over the city below my window, and felt the particular satisfaction of work that has been done quietly and done well. At 8:45, my direct line rang. Dana. I let it go to voicemail. At 9, Diane. I picked up. She didn't apologize. Not directly. Diane was not built for direct apologies. She had grown up in a family where conflict was resolved by not mentioning it again, and where love was demonstrated through logistics, through showing up and providing and arranging things. She expressed remorse the way she expressed everything, sideways, through the practical. I'd like to have lunch, she said. Just the two of us. Whenever you're free. I looked at my calendar. 3rd week of January. My assistant can send you a time. A pause. That's almost a month away. Yes, I said. Another pause. Longer. She was recalibrating. Nadia, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. What you've built. I closed my eyes. There it was. The thing I had wanted for 3 years and the reason I had stopped wanting it, not because it wasn't real, but because it had come so late, because it was attached to discovery rather than knowing, because she had been capable of it all along and had simply never chosen it until the room changed around her. Thank you, Diane, I said. And I kept my voice kind because she was still my husband's mother and I was not in the business of burning things that didn't need to burn. I'll see you in January. Ryan flew home 4 days later. He sat across from me at our kitchen table on a Sunday morning with coffee going cold between us and listened to the whole thing. He didn't interrupt. He didn't defend his family reflexively the way he sometimes had in the past. He listened with the focused, slightly stricken expression of a person hearing a story they should have already known. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. I should have seen it, he finally said. The way they talked to you, I should have said something a long time ago. You weren't there for most of it. That's not an excuse. He turned his coffee cup in his hands. I'm sorry, Nadia. I'm really sorry. I believed him. That was the thing about Ryan that had always been true, underneath the distracted traveling and the family blindness and the easy comfort of someone who had never had to fight for his place in a room. He was genuinely sorry when it mattered. He was capable of real accountability. It was one of the reasons I had married him. I don't need you to fix it, I said. I need you to see it going forward. I will, he said. He looked at me with something new in it, something that had been there before, but was now unobstructed. You know, I've always known you were extraordinary. I just think I assumed everyone else could see it too. They couldn't, I said. They do now. I thought about that. About whether it was better to be finally seen, or whether there was something permanently bent in being seen only after proof. I didn't have a clean answer. I suspected I wouldn't for a while. Dana called me, Ryan said. 3 times. I know. She called me once. What are you going to do? I looked at him. The Providence deal closes in March. I'll handle it the same way I've handled every other deal. Professionally. That doesn't change. I wrapped both hands around my mug. The rest of it, I don't know yet. I need her to understand that my silence was never her permission. Ryan nodded slowly. She wants to apologize. Genuinely, I think. She's genuinely shaken. I know she is, I said. That doesn't mean I'm ready to receive it yet. He accepted that. 3 weeks later, I had lunch with Diane at a restaurant in Midtown she had chosen, somewhere quiet and well-lit and expensive, the kind of place that communicated effort. She arrived before me and stood when I came in, which she had never done before, and the difference in her bearing was subtle enough that a stranger wouldn't have noticed and impossible for me not to. We ordered. We talked about Ryan's travel schedule and the holidays and a mutual acquaintance who was renovating a house upstate. We were careful with each other in the way of people who have broken something and have not yet decided whether they're going to try to repair it or simply be more careful around the damage. Over dessert, she put her fork down and looked at me with the expression I had been waiting for, the one that cost her something. I let Dana set the tone, she said. For years. Because it was easier than managing her. She's always been the one I had to keep happy. She shook her head slightly. That's not a good reason. That's barely even a reason. It's an explanation, not an excuse. I let the distinction sit between us. It was more than I had expected. I saw you as Ryan's wife, she said. I should have seen you as a person first. I should have been curious about you. I wasn't. I looked at her for a moment. This woman who had never once asked me what I was building, who had passed the bread and made the conversation and presided over 12 holiday dinners and never once asked me, with genuine curiosity, about my life. Why weren't you? I asked. Honestly, not accusingly. She was quiet for a long time. Long enough that the restaurant filled the silence with the ambient sound of other people's lunches, other people's easy conversations. Because you were quiet, she said finally. And I mistook that for having nothing to say. It was the most honest thing she had ever said to me. I didn't forgive her in that moment. Forgiveness, the real kind, takes longer and happens in private and is not a single decision but a series of small ones. But I heard her. I let it land. I appreciate you saying that, I said. She nodded once. Carefully, like someone accepting terms. We finished our coffee and she paid and walked with me to the door and hugged me in a way that was different from the standard holiday embrace. Tighter, briefer, more real. Outside, she put on her gloves and looked at me in the winter light and said, I hope we can start over. I considered the word, start, over. I think we can start somewhere new, I said. That's not quite the same thing. She understood the difference. I could see it in her face. I walked back to my office through the cold, hands in my pockets, thinking about the particular freedom of having said exactly what you mean to someone who finally had the capacity to hear it. Not the freedom of winning. Not the cleaner, simpler satisfaction of revenge that wraps up neatly. The more complicated freedom of being fully known in a room and surviving it. Dana and I spoke for the first time 6 weeks after the dinner. She called on a Tuesday afternoon, and I answered. She apologized properly, by which I mean, she didn't soften it into a misunderstanding or cushion it with context. She said she had been dismissive and cruel, and that it had come from her own insecurity about her marriage, her business, the gap between how she presented herself, and how much of her success had depended on an investor she'd never bothered to put a face to. She said she was ashamed. I believed her. Dana, for all her performance, had never been a liar. The cruelty had always been careless rather than calculated, which made it in some ways worse and in other ways easier to set down. Your work is good, I said. It always has been. That was never the issue. I know, she said. The issue was me. Yes. A long pause. Is there a path forward? Professionally? I thought about Warren's call, the conversations we'd had since, the new project pipeline Dana had submitted the previous week, solid work, careful projections. The proposal of someone who was building something real and knew it. There's always been a path professionally, I said. That wasn't in question. And personally, I looked out my office window at the city below. All those lives moving forward without asking permission. All that forward motion that has nothing to do with being seen and everything to do with simply refusing to stop. That depends on who you decide to be, I said. Not for one dinner. Consistently. She exhaled. That's fair. I know it is. At the next family gathering, a spring birthday for Ryan's father, I arrived as myself. Not the careful, quiet version. Not the woman who had organized herself around not needing anything from these people. I wore the suit I wore to board meetings. I shook hands with the guests as an equal and not as an appendage. I sat at the table and spoke when I had something to say and did not soften the edges of it. No one called me a charity case. No one hinted at it. The silence where those remarks had once lived was not the silence of fear. It was something more permanent. Diane made sure I had the seat next to her. She introduced me to the new guests with my name and my title and a pride that was clearly new but clearly real. Dana sat across the table. We didn't perform closeness. We were civil. We were honest. We were two people who were beginning to understand that the relationship they were going to have was nothing like the one they had started with. I could work with that. Warren attended. He caught my eye from across the room and nodded, respectful, the way professionals do when they have moved from one chapter to another. We spoke briefly about the Providence opening, which was 3 months out, and about the new project, which was progressing well. He said, before he moved on, that he looked forward to a long working relationship. I told him I felt the same. On the drive home, Ryan reached across and took my hand without saying anything. We drove in comfortable silence, the way you can only drive with someone who has seen you clearly and chosen to stay. I watched the spring trees go by outside the window and thought about how the most powerful thing I had ever done was also the quietest. Not the reveal, not the restructure, not the moment Warren said my name and the table went still. The most powerful thing had been all the years I spent becoming someone whose silence could carry that much weight, all the work done in private. All the mornings in the office and the decisions that didn't make anyone's holiday conversation and the agreements I signed that required me to say nothing so I could build something. You are not diminished by being unknown. You are only diminished by believing that you are. I had stopped believing it. And the truth, once it stands up, doesn't need you to hold it anymore. It just stands.